Let's look at an example. Let's say we had a $300 cost plus a margin based on cost equals the selling price, and let's say that was a 35% margin based on cost. If we look at our normal grid, there's always a dollar amount on top, there's always a percent on the bottom. The first thing plus the second thing always equals the third thing. Now, $35% times the cost, where does the 100% go? If it's based on cost, it goes under cost, doesn't it? 100% of the cost is the cost. 35% times the cost, 35% times 300 is what? 105, and we add those together and the selling price is 405. And if we needed to know, what would the percent be here? That'd be 135%, wouldn't it? Okay, here's a business that has a 35% margin based on cost. Now let's say this business gets sold to another business. Let's say this is a successful business. Well, the new business comes in and it says, I'm not going to mess with your prices. You're doing great. You buy it for $300, you sell it for $405. You make $105 on that item. Now, obviously, that's gross profit. There are things like salaries and rent and utilities and all sorts of things that are costs of doing business other than just what you pay for the merchandise. So, be very careful if you want to go into business for yourself. Most small businesses fail because their pockets aren't deep enough. In other words, it takes several years for a business to start generating money. So you have to think, I'm going to do this as a hobby for 2 or 3 years. I'm going to have to make my living some other way because it takes that long to start turning around and make a profit generally. So be sure you don't think, well, gosh, if I can sell 10 of those a week and make $105 on each one, if it were that easy, everybody would do it. It's not that easy. Okay, let's say somebody buys this business. They say, you're doing great. We're not going to change that. We're still going to pay $300 for it. We're still going to make $105. We're still going to sell it for $405. Unfortunately, we own 50 other businesses, and all of our businesses base their margin on selling price. So the question is, if I have a business that has a 35% margin on cost, what is the equivalent percent margin on selling price? That's what I want to know. Because I'm just going to take those same prices and I'm going to say, I'm not going to base it on cost anymore. I'm going to base it on selling price. Now, it's really pretty easy to do. Here's the way I suggest to do it. The book has a couple of formulas that you can memorize and add one or subtract one and take the whatever. And they're not really that hard, but I think this way is more intuitive, so I'll show you this way, and we can ask questions about it next week. Let's say we don't know this anymore. All we're given is this. I just wanted to show you a scenario that would apply in real life. Let's say someone says, I've got a business that makes 35% margin on cost. What's the equivalent percent margin on selling price? Well, what I would do is I would look at this. Here's something that's kind of a truism. When in doubt, remind yourself of something that you know is true. In this chapter, this is what we know is true. Okay? Cost plus margin equals selling price. We're going to use that formula on just about every single problem. Now, let's just put this number where it would go. If I had a margin that was based on cost, where would the 100 go? It would go under cost. And now, in this scenario, I'm not even going to worry about top and bottom. I'm just going to say, what if it costs $100 and was 100%? I'm going to make those two numbers the same so I can do it all on one line. Okay? So if I paid 100 for it, where would the 35 go? It would be the margin, the markup. And what number would go under here? 135. Would everyone agree that I've made up a situation here? If I buy it for 100, sell it for 135, mark it up $35, that is a situation where this is a 35% margin based on cost. And to verify that, we say, we take this thing and we divide it by the 100 and we get 35% because that's the base. Now, all we have to do to find this other percent is say, well, comparing it to the cost, it's 35%. But I've just been bought by a business that compares it to the selling price. All we have to do is take that margin and divide it by the other number that's not 100. So take 35 divided by 135. That's the number that goes here. That'll be a decimal. We'll base it on, we'll change it to a percent, round it to 2 decimal places after we change it. So 35 divided by 135 is 0. Point what? 25923. Does that sound? 925. Okay. Oh, well, we need to know it to 5 decimal places. All right. 25925. Does that look right to 5? Now, if we change that to a percent, we'd move it 2 places to the right. That'd be 25.925%, wouldn't it? But we're going to round it to the nearest hundredth of a percent. Okay? Now, Homework Manager may say something different on a particular problem. Make sure you round it the way they want it. But generally, on most of the problems in the book, they say round to the nearest hundredth or 100th percent as needed. In other words, 2 decimal places, whether you're doing it as a decimal or whether you're doing it as a percent. So we would round this to 25 point what? 2 places, 93. Yeah. So this tells us that if I buy a business that has a 35% margin on cost, I can leave their prices just like they are, and I just say, okay, I need a 25.93% margin on selling price. That's the same thing. It's the same numbers. If I had 300 and 105 and 405, and I said, I want my 100% here, how would I know what goes there? I'd take 105 and divide it by 405. Try that. 105 divided by 405 ought to be this exact same answer. Is it? Cool. Notice, though, we found the answer without knowing a particular price. All we have to do is know the percent and put the 100 where it goes, figure out what the other number is, divide the margin by that other number.
I missed what this is about. To find what margin on cost is in relation to selling price.
This is equivalent margin. How do they describe it here? Conversion of markup percent. On the test study guide, it says one problem will give the percent markup on one base and ask for the equivalent markup on the other base.
Is this the only one that's going to use the word equivalent? The other one would be the other examples you showed us.
Well, I don't want to say. I'm not going to guarantee that.
So
and
how are we going to distinguish what they're talking about?
Read the words and know what they mean. I don't want to say, anytime you see this word, we do that. That's kind of a monkey see, monkey do approach to mathematics, and I'd rather you understand what the terms mean and know how they relate to each other. But yeah, if I would generally phrase it as a 35% margin on cost is equivalent to what percent margin on selling price. Let's do it the other way. A 35% margin on selling price is equivalent to what percent margin on cost? Okay. What if we asked it that way? Let's go ahead and do that problem. In fact, let me put that on top here. A 35% margin on selling price is equivalent to what percent margin on cost? Well, let's set up a situation that illustrates this that we're given. Cost plus margin is always equal to selling price. In this example, if it's 35%, where's the 35 go? Under C, M, or S? 35% is the margin based on selling price, isn't it? So that's the margin, that's the 35. Where does the 100 go? That's under selling price, isn't it? 35% margin on selling price means selling price is the base, that's the 100. So what goes here? 65. Okay? So would everyone agree that if I bought something for $65, had a margin of 35, sold it for 100, that that's a 35% margin based on selling price? 35 divided by 100 is 35%. Now I get bought out by a company who bases all their margins on cost. Well, they're still going to pay 65 for it. They're still going to sell it for 100. They're still going to make $35. But instead of taking 35 and dividing it by the selling price, they're going to take 35 and divide it by the cost. And that's going to be their markup percent on cost. So take 65 divided by 35. I'm sorry, other way around. Margin divided by either cost or selling price, depending on what you're basing it on. And that should be slightly under 50%. Say it real loud, slowly, one digit at a time. 4, or is it 0.5? Ah, it's more than half. Does that sound right? That's why nobody was saying something, because they said, he said it should be less than half. I got more than half. The emperor has no clothes. The teacher can make a mistake, and does. The teacher does make mistakes. Did everybody get something like this? And now if we convert that to a percent, we move it 2 places to the right, round it to 2 decimal places, and we get 53 point what? 85%. Okay, 53.85%. Now, let's notice a pattern here. In our first example, which percentage was bigger, when it was based on cost or when it was based on selling price? Which percent was bigger? The percent on cost was bigger than the percent on selling price, wasn't it? How about here? Percent on cost was bigger than the percent on selling price, wasn't it? If we always have to sell it for more than what we pay for it, then that's always going to be true. If this number is always smaller, then if we divide it by the cost, we're going to get a bigger answer than if we divide it by a bigger number, the selling price. We're going to get a smaller answer. When I first started teaching this course,